Chapter 2, Basic Neurobiology. This chapter will provide basic information on the purpose and function of the brain's neurological system with regard to mental health functioning. Neurons. A neuron has four basic parts: the soma, dendrites, axon, and terminal buttons. The soma or cell body contains the vital parts of the cell. Dendrites are small and large branches of the neuron that receives messages from other neurons through multiple molecular receptors. The axon is a long slender tube that carries messages from the soma to its terminal buttons. And finally, the terminal buttons, which are at the end of the neurons, hold the chemical messages or neurotransmitters. Terminal buttons deliver transmitters to other neurons across a physical gap called the synapse. Neurons transmit messages or communicate with each other. So this is later on how you'll learn that drugs can affect this transmission. Neural communication, electrical and chemical properties. Neuron communication is facilitated either electrically or chemically. This communication is facilitated electrically within the neuron and chemically between the neurons. All drugs and substances that can activate neurons in the brain or central nervous system affect communication. Endogenous substances such as endorphins, insulin, testosterone are made within the body. Exogenous substances such as caffeine, vitamins, and herbs are produced outside the body and introduced into the body in some manner. Receptor sites on the postsynaptic membrane or dendrites often target medications that can activate adjacent cells. That action begins when a receptor is stimulated by a neurotransmitter. Ions are electrically charged particles which are outside the neuron if they are negatively charged and inside the neuron if they are positively charged. The resting potential of a neuron is the unexcited or relaxed state. This is when we're looking at depolarization and hyperpolarization. When a cell is significantly stimulated or depolarized, it generates messages and electrical impulse called action potential. The action potential is produced when a neuron resting potential becomes less negative or depolarized. A depolarized membrane is more likely to transmit an electrical impulse. A hyperpolarized membrane is less likely to transmit an electrical impulse. All neurons may receive both excitatory and inhibitory messages at the same time. Whether a message is or is not transmitted depends on the relative number of excitatory or inhibitory signals of the neuron, in which excitatory messenger outnumbers the inhibitory messengers. An action potential message will be initiated along the neurons. If the excitatory messengers outnumber the inhibitory messengers, an action potential message will be initiated along the axon. All action potentials are the same size when they are generated, but not all behavior responses are equal in magnitude. For example, a loud sound may generate 10 action potentials in a time period, whereas a soft sound may generate only 2 action potentials during the time period. Thus, the behavior response to the loud sound is usually greater than a response to a soft sound. An excitatory signal leads to the process occurring again. An inhibitory effect decreases the further signal. Remember that depolarization excites and hyperpolarization inhibits. Potential is technically over when some of the neurotransmitters is taken back into the terminal buttons. This process is called reuptake. A neurotransmitter and its individual receptor site together act like a key fitting into a lock. A neurotransmitter may open an ion channel in either two major ways. One direct way is through drugs are generally referred to as ligands. An ion channel opens when the ligand binds to the receptor sites. The second way a neurotransmitter opens in ion channels by inducing chemical changes within the cell. For example, dopamine, glutamate, GABA, and serotonin all facilitate neurotransmission by utilizing G protein linked receptors. As we look at the neurotransmitters, three main neurotransmitters are involved in emotion: dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin. Dopamine and norepinephrine are closely related and synthesized from the same precursor substance known as tyrosine. Tyrosine is an amino acid that comes from the diet. A dietary source of tyrosine includes meat, poultry, seafood, beans, tofu, and lentils. Serotonin plays a large role in the brain functioning, including mood, anxiety, irritability, tranquility, etc. Serotoninogenic abnormalities or drops in serotonin levels are associated with anxiety disorders, mood disorders, and psychotic disorders. Behavior is complicated. No one neurotransmitter should be considered in isolation. For example, an individual with depression might be caused to be insufficient levels of serotonin, norepinephrine, dopamine, or in some cases all three. Most brain functions results from multiple influence of several different neurotransmitters trying to find their own delicate balance. When we look at neurotransmitters of emotion and behavior, there are three main neurotransmitters involved in emotion: dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin. Other neurotransmitters also might be influential, such as GABA, glycine, and glutamate, and endorphins. Drugs may alter behavior by interfering with or interrupting any of the process occurring during neurotransmission. A drug that increases the ability or action of a neurotransmitter is called an agonist. Agonists are agents to bind to receptors and act. For example, fluoxetine, or what's known on brand as Prozac, increases the action of serotonin on the postsynaptic membrane. Conversely, a drug that decreases the availability or action of a neurotransmitter is called an antagonist. This receptors and block. For example, risperidone, or also known the brand name Risperdal, blocks dopamine at the postsynaptic membrane.